Chavre, hello. A guten Erev Yom Tiv. Chag Sukkos. Today is Erev Yom Tiv. Today we shall speak in Mirza Hashem U'Be'ez Shem Yisbarach, a thought for the festival of Sukkos. Before we begin, we'll start with a prayer, a pasuk from Tilim, Kapitel Chav Gimel, pasuk Aleph, and pasuk Hey. It's a famous kapitel. Mizmer LeDavid, Adinoi Roi Lo Yechsar. David HaMelech says, Hashem is my shepherd, I shall not be lacking. Look at the Eibishter as a faithful shepherd who takes care of all our needs. A loving shepherd who looks after every single one of us. He looks after his flock and takes care of all the needs. To the extent that the pasuk says, David HaMelech said, Tarek lefonei shulchan neged tzoyrei Dishanta v'shem reishi koisi rivaya. David HaMelech said, you will set before me a table in front of my tormentors. You have smeared with oil my head, my cup is brimming. And Rashi says, what does it mean? Dishanta v'shem reishi kvanish nimshachti al picha lemelech. I have already been anointed a king by your word. Koisi rivaya. My cup is brimming. Which basically the theme is over here, that Hashem takes care of us, Hashem protects us, and it's about the idea of betochen, that a Yid looks at the Eibishter Bechlal and he feels, Hashem Roi, Hashem is my shepherd, and therefore Lo Yechzer. I don't feel like I'm missing anything, I'm not worried about anything, because I'm in Hashem's hands. We're really continuing a theme that we started speaking about last week, Friday, and we connected to the pasuk in Azinu, Kenesha Yore Kinoi, and I mentioned Sukkos already, but today I'm going to elaborate on this a bit more. And then comes the pasuk which says, Tarech lefonei shulchan neged tzoyrei dishanta b'shemen reishi koisi revaya, which means that when I think about Hashem's protection, it's not only to the degree of the bare necessities, that He takes care of whatever is essential, but no, He takes care of me in a way of royalty. Nimshachti, I'm a king. There's luxury, there's expansion, there's broadness. Koisi revaya, it's a full cup, it's overflowing. All these words, when we say Dishanta b'shem reishi and Koisi revaya, that's emphasizing that it's not just that we fill the void, but it's actually wealth. In other words, breitkeit, broadness, etc. And that's how we have to look at it, and that's how we have to think in those terms when we think about being in Hashem's protection. We're going into the Yontif of Sukkos, and one of the Pesukim that talks about Sukkos, it says that Besukkos Teishu Shivas Yomim, you should sit in the Sukkah for 7 days, Kol Ezech Besukkah, Kol Ezech B'Yisrael Yeshu Besukkos, and then it says, Leman Yedu Doyoseichem, Ki Besukkos Heishafti Es B'nei Yisrael, B'Yitzi Yosom Me'eretz Mitzrayim. That your generations will know that I caused the Yidden to dwell in booths when I took them from the land of Egypt. Ani Hashem Elikechem. So, over here we see something unique before we get into what the word Sukkos means. Bas Sukkos Yishavti. We find something novel. We find something unique when it comes to the mitzvah of Sukkos. And that is that the Torah actually gives a reason for it. You can count on your fingers how many of the 613 mitzvahs does the Torah actually say why. Like for example, Gid HaNosha. It says we are not allowed to eat from the Gid HaNosha because of the angel that touched Yaakov's place over there, the Gid HaNosha. So too over here. This is one of the only mitzvahs in the entire Torah where it says a reason. And over here it says that when you are going to, for the future generations, keep the mitzvah Sukkos, you should know. And the Torah says you have to know. Leman yedu doyreseichem ki b'sukkos heishafti es b'nei Yisrael. So this is also a nafkamina. It has relevance in halacha and actual law that it's brought down from the Bach and the Tur about kavonas hamitzvah, the intention of the mitzvah. And actually many Maimorei Chassidus that start with the verse B'Sukkos Teishvu talk about this. And that is that when it comes to most mitzvahs, there's not really much of a discussion of the reason behind the mitzvah when the person's performing it. Of course, the more you know, the better, because it adds a richness and a depth to doing the mitzvah, to the performance. But usually, the intention is not really essential to the performance. We just say there's kavana klolis and there's kavana pratis. The general intention is meant to be there. In other words, and that's why we have the nusach, where we say by all mitzvahs, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvah sov v'tzivonu. You meant to think, I'm fulfilling God's command. Hashem commanded me, and I'm doing His command. Yes, sir. So that's the general, that's called the kavana klolis. A general intention you meant to have by all mitzvahs. But then there's a kavana pratis. Each mitzvah has a particular intention. What's the motive? What's the drive? What's the point behind it? Every single mitzvah has a different kavanah. So usually we say, if you don't know the kavanah pratis, if you don't know the particular intention behind the particular mitzvah, you just fulfill it with having in mind the general intention that you're fulfilling the command of Hashem. It's enough. But over here comes along the mitzvah sukkah, because the pasuk says explicitly that you should sit in the sukkos. And why? Leman yedu ki besukkos heshafti es bnei Yisrael. So the pasuk actually states explicitly that when you sit in the sukkah, you have to have this in mind, that you should know. That means when you walk into the sukkah, it's brought down the halacha. Not that if you don't, you're not yotze, but still, you're meant to have this in mind. When you go into the sukkah to meditate, internalize, think about this idea that Hashem sat us in booths as we went out of Egypt. So what does it mean? What does it mean? Why do we have to think that? What's the point behind that itself? And that's why we have to talk about it today as we go into Sukkos, because this is very essential to the whole holiday, because the Torah tells us that this is what we should have in mind. So as to what does it mean by Sukkos, there's a machlokes, there's an argument in the Gemara. Rebbe Eliezer says that what does it mean Sukkos? Sukkos mamish, literally huts. That the Yidden, from when they left Egypt, they were living in huts. Right? From the very beginning and throughout all the years in the desert. And Rebbe Kiva says, what does Besukkos mean? Besukkos is referring to the Ananei HaKoved, the protecting clouds. It's not meant literally, it's meant figuratively. So that's a famous machlokes. And the question is, what do we take from this machlokes? What do we learn out of this machlokes? And especially if we're sitting now in Sukkos and it says we have to think about that. L'man yedu ki b'Sukkos heshafti. So are these two different ideas in the theme or not? So I'm not here to give the answer. Could be there's many different approaches. But I once heard a vort, and I think it's a good vort. I can't remember exactly where I saw it explicitly. But I think it's very appropriate and very meaningful. Even though this thought is brought out by everywhere, but not exactly the way I'm going to present it. And that is that the whole idea of the theme of Sukkos is Hashem's protection. Not only that He always saves us, but He continuously protects us. As we spoke many times, one of the most fascinating subjects in Yiddishkeit, the immortality of the Jew. The eternity of the Jewish nation, which many people look at it as the greatest miracle of all time. Even the existence of every Jew, as is spoken about at length in many places. So really, this is the theme of this mitzvah. Hashem's constant protection. But where do we see the contrast? How can we measure the contrast? And the contrast is measured by saying that Besukkos could mean a hut and an Ananei HaKoved. In other words, in essence, in a way, Hainu Hach. It's the same thing as far as the Jew is concerned. Even if we walk into a sukkah, and the sukkah is a hut, it's a shack, it's bare minimum, it looks very transitory, temporary, and actually al pi halacha. It's meant to be a diras arai, that's the whole point. comes along Yiddishkeit and tells us you should know that as far as the Jew is concerned, even if the material surroundings and the material circumstances seem very weak and vulnerable, guess what? As far as we're concerned, as I walk into the sukkah, and it's a simple hut, and it looks very vulnerable and weak and nothing, and maybe even poor, guess what? You know what I really understand? That the relationship that I have with Hashem and the Jewish nation's survival is that right now I am not in a hut or a shack which is very weak. I'm actually in the hands of Hashem and Nani Yakovit. In other words, that exactly is the point. That even though the material circumstances could feel and look like it's a hut, it's nothing, very fragile and can be destroyed, but really, I'm so confident, I'm so sure, I feel so safe that I'm completely in the hands of Hashem, in the Nani Yakovit. And just like in the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and this is the theme of the mitzvah, as the famous pasuk, Lech Teich Achrei b'midbar, we had nothing. A Jewish nation going into the desert with no means to survive. The most dangerous, inhospitable terrain and environment. Physically impossible. Go into a desert for 40 years. But what's the problem? No problem. As verbunden eben fällt man schon punten. If you're connected to the Eibishter himself, you won't fall down below. We're connected to a superpower that transcends the physical, so therefore makes no difference what the physical circumstances are. We're connected to a power which is infinite, beyond anything physical, and therefore there's nothing to worry about. The Nani Yakovit will take care of everything and anything, and our survival is totally assured. And therefore, as all have spoken about, the survival of the Jewish nation defies all laws of nature, all laws of existence. And the answer is, what is the secret of the immortality? Because we have a special relationship with Hashem. We're being protected. Hashem's shield. Hashem is our shield. And now we can understand the relevance of what we can learn from whether the Gemara is saying that it means literally a hut, or whether it means Nani Yakovit. It's actually teaching us that very lesson, that even if it's though a sukkah is only a diras aray, we feel as confident and secure and sure as if it was something which is invincible. And what it means, Laman Yedu, like we spoke in the last video, last lesson, but like everything, you have to integrate it. You have to personalize it. Simu levavchem. And that's why in the Maimorim of Chassidus, which talk about the Sukkos Teshu, it speaks about the concept of das. And as a matter of fact, it's in both mitzvahs of Sukkos. Whether it's the sukkah is called a makif, and the idea of Sukkos Teshu means hisyashvus, to bring down, internalize, make pnimius, make inner, from within, the makif, which is a very high level. We're not doing this subject justice right now, but I just want to point out that the stress is on the word das. Das means that it becomes one with you. It's not surrounding you. It's not from without, it's from within. So Sukkos Teshu means we internalize it. We take the highest level, the concept of transcendence and infinity, and bring it down into das. It becomes real. And then the same thing is true concerning the lulav. According to Kabbalah, we take the four minim and we bring it to the heart. We shake it and then we bring it to the heart. And it's the same idea, similar, of taking certain levels, makifim, and internalizing it. It should reach you to the degree that it becomes personal. Simu levavchem, pay attention, take it seriously. So both mitzvahs, Sukkos and the four kinds, are both about living it. But living it means that it's real. It's real. You ask yourself, what does it mean that I believe in God? What does it mean that I feel secure in Hashem's hands? It means, therefore, I don't have worries, I don't have anxiety, I don't have stress, I don't have tension. That has to be the difference. Because or else it's not really real. That means your trust in Hashem hasn't really been internalized. So there's a famous story, since tonight. Oh, before we say the story, I'll just connect it, one connection to the Parsha Hashavua. We're learning now Parsha V'zeis HaBracha, and straight away at the beginning of the Parsha, it says, V'zeis HaBracha Shaberech Moshe Ish Elikim. Moshe blesses the Yidden, and he starts off that Hashem is Sinai Ba. He talks about Hashem. So Rashi says right away, Pasach Tchila B'Shivchei Shamakim. First Moshe starts giving the praise of Hashem. V'achakach Pasach B'Tzorcheim Shel Yisrael. And then he starts dealing with the needs of Israel. In other words, then he starts giving brachas to take care of whatever needs we have. And Rashi explains, why did he go do it like that? Because immediately he starts off to talk about the schus of the Yidden. V'chol zeh derech ritzuyu. This is in order to engender Hashem's goodwill towards Yidden. Kloimar kedai heim elu shetocha aleim bracha. So in other words, it's the same idea. First, we make sure our bond and connection with Hashem is reinforced. That's what Moshe does here. He starts with Shvachish Hamakayim. But what's the point? What's the outcome? What's the result? The whole point is that once we have our relationship healthy with Hashem, so then what gets taken care of is Tzorcheim Shel Yisrael, Tocha Aleim Baracha. As soon as we get the special connection firm, reactivated, then obviously the result is that the brachas flow. And what sort of brachas? Infinite brachas. Only brachas the way Hashem can give us brachas without any limits. Tonight is also the Yishpiz of the Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Yishpiz, and there's a very, very famous story, a well-known story that many of you may know, with the Baal Shem Tov and the attribute of betachan, of trust. And the story is that the Baal Shem Tov one day heard a voice, a heavenly voice, and it instructed him to travel to a certain village to learn to see the attribute of betachan, how amazing it is and how powerful it is. So Baal Shem Tov traveled with the students to the village, and he found the local inn that was run by the Jew, and he walks into the inn. It was towards late evening, and they went to sleep. The next day, they got up, and they were going to daven shachas. As soon as they were about to daven shachas, the sheriff is the one who enforces the laws of the local poritz. So this Jew, who's the innkeeper, had leased the inn from a poritz, a very powerful landowner, and the poritz had a sheriff. So as they're about to start shachris, the local sheriff comes in, the landlord's sheriff, and he walks in with a big stick, and he bangs on the table 3 times. Okay. The Baal Shem Tov and the Talmidim are curious, what is this about? To see the sign of the sheriff is like when we see riot police or the super highway patrol. It's always usually something serious. So the Baal Shem Tov was looking at the local, the innkeeper, the host, to see if there's any sign of worry. Anyways, can't tell anything from the face of the Yid. No worries. Anyways, they daven shachas. After the shachas, however long shachas took, the sheriff shows up again and bangs very loudly 3 times on the table with his stick. And this time, again, there's no sign of the balabos, the local innkeeper's face of anything, but the Baal Shem Tov was curious, so the Baal Shem Tov asked him, what's going on over here? Why is the sheriff coming? So he answered that this is a warning that I must pay the poritz today the back rent. And this warning is repeated 3 times. And if I don't pay after the 3 warnings, the poritz will throw me and my whole family into prison. So the Baal Shem Tov tells him, obviously you have the money, right? Because by the look in your face, it looks like you're not worried at all. So the Yid says, I'll tell you the truth, I don't have a single penny cent to pay the rent. But Hashem will no doubt provide the money. So let's sit and eat and drink without hurrying or worrying. Because originally the Baal Shem Tov was saying, obviously you have the money, so just go pay now. We'll sit here and wait until you come back. No, he said, I don't even have a single penny to pay, but don't worry, the Eibush will definitely provide. Let's, meanwhile, sit, eat, and drink. At the end of the meal, the sheriff comes a third time and knocks again 3 times. And the innkeeper still shows not one iota on his face of a warrior concerned. And he's talking not worried or concerned. And he says, okay, now we're going to bench. And they bench b'mesinos. He's taking his time with kavanah, with intention, etc., etc. Anyways, after they finish benching with all the kavanahs, mila b'mila, he says, okay, now I have to go pay the parts. He puts on his Shabbos clothes, as he stated in the Maisa, and he goes out to pay the parts. The Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim were very, very curious to see what's going to happen. And the Baal Shem Tov had received instructions to learn betachon from this person. So therefore he followed from a distance this person to see what's going to happen. So they open the door, they see this the way the innkeeper is walking down the road. All of a sudden a horse and carriage comes towards the innkeeper. And the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim noticed the way the driver of the horse and the wagon stop. And the driver starts having a conversation with this Yid. And then the conversation finishes, and the wagon driver proceeds along the road in the opposite direction of the local innkeeper, and the Yid is going in the other direction towards the parts. They're still watching, and all of a sudden, after around 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, the wagon driver calls after the Yid. He says, hello, whatever. He calls him by his name. He says, come here. So the Yid goes back, turns around and goes back to the wagon. And the Baal Shem Tov sees the way the wagon driver takes out money and gives it to the innkeeper. And then the innkeeper hurriedly walks away. So then the wagon driver continued on the road. So Baal Shem Tov went over to the wagon driver and said, tell me, what happened over here? So the wagon driver tells the Baal Shem Tov that I came to offer him a business deal today. And I decided I want to become partners. I want to become partners with him in his business. And I decided I'm going to pay him now on the estimate of the profit, what he's going to make the entire upcoming winter. But the price that I was ready to pay, he couldn't agree on. He didn't want to agree on it. So therefore, I made the offer. He refused the offer. We started parting ways. But then 1 minute or 2 later, I reconsidered. I thought to myself, he's a very honest person. He wouldn't rip me off. If he says a price, that means because that's how much it's really worth. So therefore, I reconsidered and I decided to give him the amount which he wanted. And then he told me, by the way, that he's in a big rush because he has to go pay the parrots. He has to go pay the local landlord the rent. So Baal Shem Tov turned to his Talmidim and he said, you see how strong is the power of betachon. So this is the story and this is the lesson. And it's not always so easy, but this is really what is demanded of us. As it says in many places, that the measure of betachon is a sense of peace and tranquility. That's the way it's spoken about at length in Chovos HaLevavos, which the Rebbe gave many people a lesson to learn the Chovos HaLevavos. So this is what it means. It means that tonight, as we go into the Sukkah, and we think about what does it mean? B'Sukkos Teishu, L'man Yedu. The number one theme of Sukkos is Hashem's protection. We're in His hands, and we have to train ourselves, condition ourselves to think about how we are surrounded and protected with a special protection from all sides, and therefore we have to reach a state of what's called absolutely no worries and absolutely serenity, being in a state of serenity and calm and bliss and peace. Omein Ken Yiratzen. Everybody should take from this Yontiv's Man Simchasenu the ability to be able to achieve that level of betachon and the merit of that betachon, As we all know, one of the most famous sayings of the Rebbe, Tracht gut wird sein gut. This is the same idea. In the merit of that Petochen, we'll all come to the day of Yakum Lanu Sukkos Dover and Ifeles. We're going to come to the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, take it from Yad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne. Good Yontif!